first temple in Jerusalem, sometime before the Babylonians besieged the city and destroyed the temple, it is assumed that it was hidden or that it disappeared.
That's your NASA laboratories. Ark of the Covenant. How did they get the Ark of the Covenant into where it is?
Oh,
yeah.
He talked about it.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
These are things he talked about that he rarely talked about.
This is not available in the internet. You don't see.
No, you don't get this in the internet.
No.
This is stuff that I was with him, and Judith was in this meeting at the University of Nebraska. And I had 5 tapes, 5 90-minute tapes. This is the only one that kind of came on that we got recorded, and so this is the stuff that we did.
Wow.
So I do the numbering on my player. If I want this subject, go back to 260 on there, on my number of my player. That's why it's numbered.
I see.
The city siege wall. Yeah, he tells about the siege wall. Why the Ark of the Covenant was placed there. Now
Okay, can we stop here? Are you? It's on now?
Yeah, it's on.
Oh, okay. Yeah, keep.
So all of this is on this cassette here of what Ron talked about at the Love Library Auditorium on March the 31st, 1990. And the professors contacted me at the University of Nebraska if I could get Ron Wyatt to come to the University of the Cornhuskers, famous Cornhusker football players, university, to lecture on this. And I said, well, I'll call him and find out. And so when we went there, he had the top professors were there with 500 people were in that auditorium. 500 people witnessed this.
Was this anybody's?
That's my drink. I'm putting it where I don't spill it.
Oh.
Well, you need to go around.
Well, I mean, she's.
You need to use the
around.
restroom?
No, the lady's.
Oh, she's done.
She's done on this
She
area.
already swept it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I'm just afraid I'll knock it over if I leave it on the table. Okay, here we go. So the head professors of ancient history, archaeology, and antiquities were all in that meeting with their students. Over 500 people were there. I introduced Ron Wyatt. They wanted me to introduce him. And so I introduced him, and then I took these notes and from this. And this is his presentation at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln, Nebraska on March the 31st, 1990. And he speaks of all of these different subjects there. And so I noted them and noted it on this cassette. And the University of Nebraska, side 2, he begins to tell in the Ark of the Covenant chamber how when he drilled the hole through the sarcophagus, which is a stone case that they put bodies in, how they brought the Ark of the Covenant out of the temple without people knowing what it was. Because if they start moving the furnishings, the people are going to be all upset. And they didn't want the Titus, when Titus came in 70 AD, which Jesus prophesied, right? And not a stone will be left on top of the other. That's what he said about their temple. Not a stone will be left. Well, that was literally fulfilled, and you can read that in the book of the historian Josephus, the book of Josephus. This is all recorded, and how they moved the materials in the sarcophagus, making it look like a funeral. So Titus's armies, who were watching Jerusalem, ready to lay siege on it, would not suspect it, and they put it in this hollowed out area which was a natural hollowed out area. It is not an area made with men's hands. It was a stone quarry, an ancient stone quarry. And when they pull stones out, there are hollows. They find hollows. So this is very important, according to Hebrews chapter 9. Not made with hands. All right, and we can talk about that. But they put it in that natural hollow and quickly bricked it up with cheap mortar. Now that's in his video on the Ark of the Covenant. He shows you where this cheap stone is of this wall that was built, and he has this vibration hammer, jackhammer in his hand, and he hits the wall. And he says, now as you can see, debris is falling down on me here. If I keep vibrating this, the whole thing above me is going to come down.
Which video are you talking about?
That's the video on the Ark of the Covenant.
Oh, okay.
And
right. We have to go back and take a look.
Yeah.
Because we bought that.
He talks about that. It might be in that one right
might
there.
Be this one?
Yeah.
We have this long time ago.
Revealing God's treasures.
Okay, we'll take a look again. See that.
So, in that, so he says, we're going to stop. And he said, we're going to do we're going to do a radar scanner here to see what's in this chamber. If I remove this, the whole thing could come down. Now, what was going to come down was the siege wall that Titus built around Jerusalem at that time to keep the people in. And then they could lay siege, and what they did was laid siege and locked the people into Jerusalem. And Josephus writes about this, that they even resorted to cannibalism in there.
Yes.
Remember that. That's in the book of Josephus. And so Ron talks about this and how they moved, before this siege wall was laid, they moved the Ark of the Covenant and the furnishings into this natural hollow. They stoned it in quickly with cheap mortar, making it look like a tomb. There are many tombs along that area, which we now call the Calvary Escarpment, or the place of the skull.
Yes.
Okay, so we know the location, right, by that.
But Henry, there's one question, because because you mentioned Titus. Is that
he was the conqueror that conquered Jerusalem. Yeah, Roman conqueror in 70 A.D.
So Ron, because I thought Ron believed that it's supposed to be like Nebuchadnezzar's time when the Ark of Covenant disappeared.
This is what we're believing. It was Nebuchadnezzar's time that put it there. And then when Titus came in, he laid the siege wall.
Right.
And it covered up where they put it in Nebuchadnezzar's day. Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Oh, yeah, okay, this is a big point. Yeah, okay.
It was put there in Nebuchadnezzar's day. If you read Jeremiah 51:52, I think it is. I should have brought my Bible in. But you will read the full listing of everything taken into Babylon.
Yes, yeah.
Everything of gold and silver and brass. They even name spoons and snuffers, what you put candles out with.
That's Nehemiah, yeah.
Jeremiah, honey. But anyhow, so why would they name spoons and snuffers, what you put a candle out with, and not name a golden box with angelic wings coming over a seat, a chair?
I listened to your seat.
Presentation of the
Ark of Covenant. I went back to check the list, in the Bible, and like you said, not just the Ark of Covenant, it's the menorah.
Yeah, the
menorah
not
there,
and
there.
the table of showbread.
Yeah, it's not there,
listed.
and the incense where they burn incense
from. Yeah, the things of incense. That would be listed.
That's the most important. Those are most important.
So they were not there. And this is my argument with the theologians.
Yeah, none of them. I was like, wow. We thought only. Yeah, you're right. And you connect that to the prophet who told the king that because you are showing this stuff to the ambassador from the Nebuchadnezzar,
that's right,
and so on. But he wouldn't be able to show those things in the holy.
The priest would not allow them to show him that.
And so that's why the ambassador's eye didn't see those, and those didn't get carried away. And that make perfect sense altogether.
That's a scriptural fine point.
Yeah.
And this is that I have had to argue from this book because of this little book of the rebirth of Judah. That's what I've had to argue with the theologians who still have it in their mind that the Ark of the Covenant was in there in the days of Jesus Christ. Oh, they do. They believe it. And many of your Bible prophecy teachers all teach that. And I say, if that's the case, when the veil of the temple was rent in twain when Jesus said it's finished, they would have seen the Ark of the Covenant. They would have seen the Holy of Holies was opened up for the first time in people's lives. They'd have seen something they'd never seen. Don't tell me that was in there. And in Hebrews 9, Paul would not say, of which we do not know now. They don't know where it is. But he begins Hebrews 9 with the listing of what justifies it being the holiest of all. The holy.
Okay, that part, since I got this opportunity, I couldn't 100% comprehend what you said.
You couldn't get that. I probably should have my Bible. I'll show it to you. Where he says, of which we cannot now clearly speak there in Hebrews 9.
Right.
He lists the items that make it the holiest of all. And then he goes on to say, of which we cannot clearly say now. They didn't know where it was. If when the veil of the temple was rent in twain, if it was there, Paul would have clearly written and said, which the eyes of all that were in the temple at that time clearly saw the furnishings. But he doesn't do that. He says, which we cannot clearly speak now.
Now,
And all theologians will agree that Paul was a student of Gamaliel.
Yes.
Which was the highest teaching of the temple and of Judaism of that day was under Gamaliel.
Okay.
Called the
Gamaliel.
What's it called? It's called the Sanhedrin. Yeah, he was the main teacher of the Sanhedrin.
Okay.
And Gamaliel, in the book of Acts, he is the one quoted in the book of Acts as saying, listen, we better back off because if this is of God, we're going to be found in contempt of killing these people, these Christians and all. And so Gamaliel speaks up in the book of Acts even about it and tells them, you better back off lest you be found that we're fighting against Almighty God. And so Gamaliel is even mentioned. And so it was put in there in the day of Nebuchadnezzar before the Babylonian siege. And then it was covered up 600 years later. 600 years later, Titus comes in, builds the siege wall, and covers up the chamber. And that siege wall is the part of that siege wall that exists to this day is what we call the place of the skull. That's a part of the original siege wall that was built by Titus in 70 A.D., which covered up the chamber, covered it up. And Ron's walking along there with the head of the Department of Antiquities in 1985 and says to them, points and says, the Ark of the Covenant is in there and the furnishings, and the head of the Department of Antiquities says, well, that's great. We'll give you a permit to start digging immediately, and we'll take care of your lodging, your food, and your clothing. Just start digging.
So the siege wall line that Titus built is the
place of the skull.
Place of the skull.
That's part of the siege wall. That's the only remaining part. They've removed a lot of it because they've made roads and everything and built. And that's the original part of the siege wall.
Oh, and that's right underneath.
It's right under that. Yes. And then they carve out the area and cut out the 3 cross holes, and they put Jesus in the center cross there.
So excuse me. So what you're saying is they moved the Ark of the Covenant
under Nebuchadnezzar's reign before the siege.
In the coffin like.
Yeah, in what Ron calls it a sarcophagus. And if you look up the word sarcophagus, it's a burial stone case like what we would call a casket.
Oh, casket. Yeah, okay.
What you put the casket in, that cement thing that they drop down in the earth, they put the casket in that, put the lid on that, which is now cement. That was carved out of stone, a stone box called a sarcophagus. So they put the Ark of the Covenant in there, and they carried and the furnishings and things and made it look like a funeral. And put those furnishings in there. Then bricked it up. And then the Babylonian siege came along. They're not going to look in a cheap man's tomb because it's nothing carved out like down through the valley of the kings where Solomon's pillar is, Absalom's pillar, and all that is down in through Hinnom Valley there. They have the tombs of the kings. This is up in a different area. Out of the eastern gate of Jerusalem, different area than the tombs burial of the kings. So they wouldn't be plundering that. That's just a cheap man's, poor man's tomb. Leave it alone. And in Islam, you know, it is a death sentence if they catch you plundering a tomb. Catch you plundering the graves. Now the Bedouins are Muslims, but they're of a different caliber, and they don't believe that. So the Bedouins will plunder tombs. And Ron, when I was with him in the mountains of Kadesh Barnea, he said, I don't want you to make too big ado about where we are right here. But he says, down under where we are, we ran a subsurface interface radar scanner and a molecular frequency generator. Now, a molecular frequency generator sends a signal into the earth. You can set it on ceramic, you can set it on gold or silver, and it will bounce back, it will bounce a signal back and will tell you if that exists down there.
Oh, okay.
So they did a test dig under the area where Moses smote the rock instead of speaking to it. And 45 feet underground is Korah, Dathan, and Abihu and his family. All of their belongings and their bodies are down there. They did a dig there, a test dig after that. And I stood right where they did the test dig. And all of that is there. They pulled out a part of an ox cart wheel. They pulled out some of the ceramics, and they pulled out not of the bones. They left the bones alone, but ceramics and gold items. The cart wheels were dated, and the ceramics dated back to the 18th dynasty of the Pharaoh of the Exodus. So they know that had to be Korah, Dathan, and Abihu. And it's an earthquake crack that goes out from the mountain where the water came out of the rock. So they had the choicest camping site right along the mountain, and the water flowed right by them, and they murmured and complained against Moses. And that's when the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up. And they're down there to this day. And that's something that archaeologically will be pulled out in one day, I believe, when Israel and that area is secured. But right now the Bedouins roam that area, and they're famous for plundering anything they can find.
Yeah.
You know, jewels.
Okay.
Visit arkfiles.net